Well, welcome back for Daily Bible with Chris for part two of today's Daily Bible reading. Earlier today, we posted the video for today, which was the reading of 5 chapters in Ezra chapter 4 through chapter 8. And that will just leave us 2 chapters left in Ezra that we will finish tomorrow, and then we'll begin the book of Nehemiah. So if you've not already watched that video or you haven't read personally those 5 chapters, I would encourage you to pause this video and go back and watch the previous video that I posted earlier today that has the reading from Ezra chapter 4 through 8, and then come back and watch this. Again, if you happen to be watching on YouTube, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with this new, very small channel. So if you would do me the honor of hitting that like button and hitting that subscribe button. I'll get it out here in a second. That subscribe button, I really would appreciate it. It helps the growth of the channel like this and the content of God's word to get out to more people. Really would appreciate it. Drop a comment on the video as well. And thank you so much for doing that. So we're going to dive in to here. We gave a little bit of context and commentary on the previous video. I'll mention some of that here, but I'm not going to rehash all of that. But just kind of bringing everybody up to speed where we left off yesterday. We had finished chapter 3. This is approximately 50 or so years after the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, and then the final group of the people from Judah are taken into Babylonian captivity. And they're in Babylonian captivity for many decades. The land there, the nation there, lays in dormant for approximately 70 years from the time of the first Babylonian invasion until they re-enter the land. And so some time is going to pass, and when during that time frame, the Babylonian Empire is going to pass off the scene. So we go from the Assyrian Empire, that's defeated by the Babylonian Empire, who is then defeated by the Medes and the Persian, or the Medo-Persian Empire, that's going to have their own territory, plus acquire the territory of Assyria, the territory of Babylon, and of course the area of Judah and Israel that those kingdoms had conquered previously. And so we have this happening. We have Cyrus. Cyrus the Great, historically, is the man on the throne of the Medo-Persian Empire at this point. And he is going to decide to allow a remnant, the people that want to leave the area of Babylon, to go back to Jerusalem, go back to Judah, and resettle there if they would like to. We estimate there's about 1 million Jews living in the area of Babylon where the Babylonian exile had taken place. And there's going to be basically 3 stages. I mean, obviously there's some probably smaller groups that trickle down, but the 3 major groups that are going to re-inhabit or come back into the land, as we said yesterday, Ezra is kind of the second Exodus. And so you're going to have a group under the leadership of Zerubbabel, as well as the high priest Yeshua. Then you're going to have Ezra, who's the author of this book, and then that's followed by Nehemiah. And so they're all kind of working at different time frames, coming in and doing different roles, different tasks. And so Cyrus is going to do this in part because of some prophecies that are discovered by some of his scribes and such. They're going to find writings from Isaiah in Isaiah chapters 44 and 45 that names Cyrus by name. 150 years before Cyrus lived, this prophecy is made. The idea that Cyrus would be God's anointed one, he'd be a shepherd, God would give him the ability to do some of the things that he's going to do, and that he would be the instrument for allowing the people to come back into the land and rebuilding the house. And so as a result of all of this, he's going to allow them to come in. There's a group of about 50 to 150,000 when you count all the men, women, and children estimated that are going to leave Babylon, are going to come into the area of Judah. And sometimes we'll use the word Israel and Judah, but it's referring to that same area that's kind of a province now of the Persian Empire. And they're going to come in, and their plan is to come in before they do anything else and to build the temple, to fix the temple, to reestablish their worship in the land. This is approved by Cyrus. Cyrus is even going to finance it with money and support. And so they're going to lead this large group out, but the vast majority of Jews are going to stay in Babylon. And we're going to see that that tends to be an issue. That's just a small segment of the people going back in, probably because things were pretty good in Babylon, and who wants to go back and have to rebuild and all of that. And sadly, many are going to just stay in Babylon. But we left yesterday with the building of the altar. They build the altar so they can offer sacrifices. And then the foundation the foundation is laid on the block of the original Solomon's temple. Now, this temple, which is referred to as the second temple, will not be as large, will not be as grand as Solomon's temple. Okay, it'll be slightly different and obviously slightly less grand. I mean, when you look at Solomon's temple, we're talking millions and millions of dollars worth of gold and silver, and we don't have anything like that in this place. It's going to be a functional temple so that people can begin to worship and celebrate their feasts once again. And so we left it yesterday. There was both weeping and shouts of joy for the fact the foundation had been built. That was like the first step, and now they can begin to put things together. And so there's weeping by some of the older people who grieved over the fact that this isn't Solomon's temple. It's not quite as great. But it would be a reminder that this was, God had allowed them to come back into the land, but they had also forfeited what they had before because of their previous idolatry. And that idea of idolatry is going to be important. So when we come into chapter 4, and also just so you understand this too, there's 10 chapters in the book of Ezra, and chapters 1 through 6 are Ezra, the scribe. He's a priest from the high priest. He's a descendant of Aaron. He's in the high priest camp, but he's specifically a scribe. And this is not just this means a person who, of course, copied the law, but knew the law of Moses, taught it very well. We're going to see this. He is a bright, very smart, and accomplished person. We get the history of this time coming into the land prior to Ezra. So Ezra is going to come in about 60 years after Zerubbabel and them come into the land before he's going to come. So we get a kind of a historian's perspective, chapters 1 through 6. And that's the time of the restoration and the rebuilding of the temple. And then we're going to see in chapters 7 through 10, that becomes now eyewitness account, because now Ezra is going to be in the land, and that'll be a time of reformation of the people there in Israel. And so we pick up in chapter 4. It's very interesting how this chapter starts off. It says, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returning exiles were building a temple for the Lord, they're going to approach Zerubbabel. So they're identified by Ezra. These are not good people, regardless of what they're going to say here in a minute. And these enemies are people that had been, if you remember, when the Babylonians took them into exile, they left some of the poor farmers and vine dressers to stay in the land, but otherwise they took the majority of the native Jewish people out. They're going to bring people from other conquered lands to settle in this area. They're going to settle in Judah. They're going to settle in the area of Samaria, which of course had been the capital city of the northern kingdom. And so we have here what we will know in the New Testament in the time of Jesus as the Samaritans. And it's a people group that are not Jewish, that are going to intermarry with those remaining very poor Jews in the land. And so you kind of have this intermarrying there. And the Jews are not going to think very highly of them, partly, I think, because of this story. They're worshipers they're very synchronistic in their worship, and meaning they're going to say, we worship Yahweh, we worship God, but we also worship all the other gods of the Babylonians and the Assyrians and wherever we came from, and we just put them all together. It's kind of like a hodgepodge, kind of like a chili, and we just blend it all together. We worship them all. We cover all of our bases. So there's no genuine dedication to God, the God of Israel, which of course would be violating the commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. I'm to be exclusively worshipped because I am the one true God. There are no other gods before me. And so we're going to see there's going to be an element of truth to what they're going to say here in a minute, but just so you understand that, and as part of that, of course, right up until the time of Jesus, the Jews do not like the Samaritans. They don't want to have anything to do with them. They're looked upon as dogs, as mongrels, for lack of a better term, for mixed breeds. There's just not a good situation with them. And probably some of that goes all the way back to this point. But they're going to come to Zerubbabel and they're going to say, hey, let us help you. We've heard you're here to build your temple. Let us help you build your temple. We've been sacrificing to him since the time of the Assyrians, and we will help you. And of course, they have different motives. Maybe they did want to let them build a temple, but the idea was, we'll build the temple, but we're going to want to eventually bring in our false gods and your God, and we'll worship them all together, and it'll be this very pluralistic kind of situation. And of course, that's what got the Jewish people in trouble to begin with. The people of Israel and Judah, and was their idol worship. They were always chasing. They would serve God for a while, and then they would chase after idols, and they'd serve God, and God had had enough of that. And so he's going to punish them. And so they're going to say, yeah, we'll help you. Sometimes you got to be really careful and watchful of some of these people that appear to be your friends or want to come along and help. sometimes it's not always smart to do that. We need to have some wisdom there, some discernment that maybe that person who says they're there to help you, we start churches, we build churches, we go into places, and maybe people that are non-believers, pagans, such, oh yeah, we'll help you, or the government will give you money to do that. And their whole point of it is to, let you do it, but then to have some element of control or influence over what you're doing. So sometimes we're better off not to get the help in a case like that. But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, who's the high priest, and the other heads, they're going to tell them, no, you will have no part in helping us build this house. We're going to do this alone. We've been called to do it. It's our job alone. We're under command of King Cyrus. He's given us the authority to do this. And this is going to ruffle the feathers of these Samaritans. They're not going to be happy about it. They're going to start to work to try to discourage the work. And in some cases, they do discourage some of the people of Judah, and it slows down the work, but the work is still continuing. And they're going to bribe some of the officials and do whatever they can to kind of slow this whole thing down. And because they've had it going their way for a while, this is meaning if they establish a temple here, it means these Jews are going to stay here, and that could cause, whatever hold we have over the land to disappear. And so they're going to do all of this stuff from the time of Cyrus through the time of Darius. And we're going to have a series of Persian kings here. And so we see here, they're kind of trying to slow everything down and cause the process not to work. Cyrus is going to pass off the scene. He's going to be succeeded by a man he's given two different names here, Ahasuerus or Artaxerxes. Now, not to be confused, because there's going to be another Artaxerxes the second, or Ahasuerus the second is going to come along later on. They like to reuse, like monarchs today, they'll reuse the names and such. So Cyrus has passed off the scene. And the temple is not completed. They've done some work on it, but it's not completed. It's been slowed down. And so these officials, these Samaritans, are going to write a letter. It's very interesting, especially these chapters here is mostly going to be correspondence. It's going to be letters, just like in the New Testament. We have a lot of the books that we have in the New Testament are letters that Paul and others will write. These are going to be a series of letters and dispatches in first person. And so Ezra will have gotten copies of this that he's going to use as he's writing this history. And basically, I'm going to give you the very abbreviated, but these different ones that are against the building of the temple, they're going to write to King Artaxerxes the first. They're going to write to them, and they're going to say, basically, are you aware that what these Jews are doing? They're rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. They're rebuilding the walls, and they're doing all these things. And don't you know that this city of Jerusalem is a land of rebellion, and that the people that lived in this land before rebelled and refused to pay taxes? And if you let them, from ancient times, they've always been a problem. And if you let them build back the walls in their city, then they're going to refuse to pay you taxes. They're going to refuse to do what you need to do, and you will no longer have a possession of this land beyond the Euphrates. And obviously, if you're King Artaxerxes, that's concerning for you, right? That something like that would happen. And so the king's going to send his response back to them, and he's going to do some research, because they're going to encourage him in their letter to check it out. Look in the historical records. You'll find, and if you remember, why does Nebuchadnezzar come in and destroy Jerusalem? Because their king, their final Judean king, had rebelled. And he's going to end up losing his sons. He's going to have his eyes blinded. So there had been this element of rebellion against the Babylonians. And so Artaxerxes is going to look up the record and go, well, you know what? There was rebellion, and this did happen. And even when they thought they had alignment with Babylon, they eventually rebelled. And so this is, and for whatever reason, now notice they don't bring up Cyrus's account. They don't bring up Cyrus's decree. They're going to way back beyond that. Go back 50 plus years, and research it. And he's going to see the history of Jerusalem and Judah toward the end of their reign. Now, I will tell you this too. In the Persian Empire, and we're going to see this when we get to the book of Esther. In the Persian Empire, once a king decreed something, it was the law. It couldn't be changed. It couldn't be, and that's going to be important to remember, because, in other words, Cyrus's decree is still in effect at this point. But we're going to see here that Artaxerxes is going to make the decision to stop their building, and he's going to send word back to these couple characters, Rehum, Shimshai, and their colleagues. He's going to basically say, I agree with you. Tell them to stop. Now, keep in mind, were the Jewish people rebuilding Jerusalem at this point? No. Were they rebuilding the walls? No. What were they building? The temple. Did they have authority to build the temple? Yes. So we've got them basically lying. It's a half truth. Yes, they're here. The Jews are here. They are working on the temple. They're doing it, but they're also doing these other things that they're not doing. And so they're going to basically tell a half truth with a lie to try to convince Artaxerxes, and he's going to go along with them. And so he is going to tell them to stop. And the work on the temple will cease for about 15 or 16 years. And during that time, Artaxerxes will pass off the scene. He's going to be succeeded by King Darius. That name will sound very familiar when we get to the book of Daniel, but I don't want to jump ahead because King Darius is there in that book as well. So when we pick up in chapter 5, some time has passed. These 15, 16 years have passed. There was probably some time during this that they could have, during that whole thing. Yes, initially they were stopped, militarily and politically from working on it, but probably they could have started back. And so for whatever reason, they don't. And so we're introduced to two prophets that'll be familiar to you if you've read the Bible, Haggai and Zechariah. They are two of what we call the minor prophets. They have the last, Malachi is the last book in the Bible, or book in the Old Testament. Haggai, Zechariah, and Haggai and Zechariah are back to back right there. They're going to come on the scene at this point, and they're going to begin to prophesy or to preach, for another way, and preach to them. And they're going to preach kind of two different ways. Haggai is going to be very if you read the first chapter of Haggai, and if you want to do that, you can read that, where he's like, why have you stopped? You've been called to do this thing. Why have you stopped to do this? In the name of the God, you're supposed to be doing this. And so both Haggai and Zechariah, through their prophecy, through their preaching and such, they're going to encourage the restarting of the work. They're going to go to Zerubbabel and Jeshua and all these who had kind of quit the work. And so it says the prophets of God were with them, helping them. So not only are Haggai and Zechariah going to encourage them with their words, like I said, Zechariah is more, Haggai is more like the abrupt type A. What are you doing? Get to it. Zechariah is a little more prophetic and some of the things he's saying, showing the prophecies, of course. And we'll see that when we get to those books. But notice it tells them they help them. They're like, we're not just going to stand here and tell you to do it. We're going to get down and do it. Have you ever had a pastor in a church? Oh, you should be out doing this, or oh, we should be doing this. And then they're not willing to go out and do it and get their fingers and hands dirty in the work, right? Oh, we should have a cleanup day, and everybody comes to do the cleanup day for the church, but the pastor's nowhere to be seen. Or, hey, we should be out witnessing, but the pastor's not going on visitation. I mean, I know this is an extreme example, but we see here, if you're going to preach it, expect it, deliver it, you got to be doing it just like everybody else. And so they're going to do that. And so we see here there's a character by the name of Tattenai. He's the governor working for the Persian Empire in this area, what they call it west of the Euphrates. Okay. And so there's Tattenai, Shethar-Bazanai, and their colleagues. Word's going to get to them that they've started back working on the temple again. And they're going to come back and say, who gave you the authority to do this? We were told, we know previously you weren't supposed to be doing this work. Who gave you the authority to start on this? And who are the ones in charge of doing this? Well, those working know that they're doing what is right. God has commanded them to do this. They know they're working under the authority of the previous king, Cyrus. So they're not hesitant. They're not rebellious. It's not any of that. It's just we're finishing what God called us to do and what Cyrus gave us permission to do. So Tattenai is like, well, I need to check this out. And so they're going to continue to work, because back then it would take a while to get from Jerusalem to Shusha, the capital, one of the capitals there in the Persian Empire. It would take several months to go back and forth between these countries. And so rather than stopping, they're like, no, just keep doing the work for now until we get word. And so they're going to send a letter to Darius. So we see Tattenai and these other officials, they're going to pen a letter. We see it writing this letter. They're basically saying, just reporting to you that we went to the house of the great, we went to where the temple is, and they're building it with cut stones and beams, and they're working diligently and succeeding through their efforts. So he doesn't have any problem against what they're doing. He just wants to make sure that what they're doing is allowed, because otherwise, he could get himself in trouble. And so he's like, hey, they're doing a good job. It's being done. They're happy about what they're doing. I just want to know who gave the order to rebuild this. And we asked the names of the leaders, and they gave them to them, and they're here. And they said, and this is the reply they gave us when we questioned it. And he's going to recount that they told them that the God of the heavens told them to rebuild the temple, and that that the temple had been destroyed because of their lack of belief. King Nebuchadnezzar had done this, but that King Cyrus, the predecessor to Darius, had given them permission to do this. And in fact, King Cyrus had sent back the gold items. Nebuchadnezzar took out the temple. He had provided gold. He'd done all these things. He'd appointed a man by the name of Sheshbazzar. We said yesterday, it's possible Zerubbabel and Sheshbazzar are the same person, because it talks about them building the foundation. Of course, we know Zerubbabel was involved in building the foundation of the temple, or it could have been two people just working in the same work. And so it's under construction. We're doing this work. We were told to stop, but we should not have been told to stop. That was not the right thing to do. And so we're fulfilling the decree of King Cyrus. And let the king research what we're saying, and we'll let the king decide the matter for us. And so we end chapter 5, we get into chapter 6, and King Darius is like, okay. So, and thankfully we find here that there's good record keeping back then. Of course, you didn't have copiers and scanners and things like you have today. I mean, everything had to be handwritten. And so Darius is going to put out the order to search the Library of Babylon in the archives and to look for this decree from Cyrus. Well, they don't find it there. They actually find it in some remote fortress in a separate province within the area of the Medes. And they're going to find a scroll, and it says exactly what they said, that in the first year of King Cyrus, he had issued a decree, and it's word for word exactly how we already read it in Ezra, and word for word as they had just related to him. And so what do we see here? Darius is going to go along with it. He's going to agree with them. In other words, he's going to say, yes, there is the authority under Darius to do this, and you need to leave them alone. Let them build it. He said, I hereby decree that they can continue to rebuild the house of God, the temple there. And not only that, because I've read this, not only are they allowed to do that, but Cyrus had decreed that the government would take care of and help finance it. So now you're going to use some of the revenues from the taxes of the people in that area is going to be used to then pay for it. Okay. When you're building doing something like a government job building type thing in an area, you use the local taxes, do it. So we're going to pull from the money of the taxes that's been collected in that area. And then whatever else is needed once the temple, for their burnt offerings, for all these things that we know about their religion that they're supposed to do, we're going to provide it all. We'll provide all the cattle. We'll provide all the food, all the wine, all of these things. To a degree, and he's going to set a little limit on it. But he says, let it be given to them so that they can offer morning and evening sacrifices to their God, so that they can pray for the life of the king and his sons. In other words, I guess Darius is hedging his bets here, because of Darius's encounters with Daniel and the lion's den, that we're going to read about eventually. Does Darius come to faith, or at the very least has a healthy respect of the God of Israel, and probably wants that God on his side? And so he's like, don't interfere with them. Allow them to worship, so they'll pray for us, pray for my sons, that we'll be successful. And and then he even adds to the decree, and he says, anybody found getting in the way of their work, that person is to be taken from their home. The largest beam or the largest wooden plank in their house will be taken from their house, put outside, and they're to be impaled on it. Now, in some translations, it says hung, and it can be confusing because we think of being hung by the neck. But when they say hang, they're meaning like impaled, or basically an early form of crucifixion. It wasn't the Romans that came up with crucifixion. Crucifixion is actually invented by the Persians. It's perfected by the Romans later on. But this idea of you would put somebody up they would be impaled either through the wood beam would be run through their body, and they would just hang there until they died, or they would be nailed to the wood beam. And so that's kind of the picture that he says, anybody does it, take them out, put up a beam from their own house, in other words, so it doesn't cost us anything, and nail them to it and let them die. And he says, I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be carried out diligently. In other words, make it happen. And so we're going to see that the Tattenai and his colleagues and such, they're going to go back and say, you're right. Continue doing what you're doing. You have the authority under Cyrus and now the authority under Darius to continue your work. And so they're going to continue to do it. It's going to take them another 4 years before they finish building in the temple. So it's not a short process. Of course, we know the original temple took, I think, over 7.5 years before it was completed. So this takes, not counting what the work they'd already done and been doing, so somewhere in that 4 to 6 years to build this second temple. And so when it's built, they have a dedication for it, a rededicating of it. They're going to sacrifice 712 animals. There's 12 goats are sacrificed for the 12 tribes, 712. They're all sacrificed in one day. Pretty large amount. I mean, pretty bloody amount to be doing that all in one day. But when you compare that to the original dedication of the temple, it was like hundreds of thousands of animals were sacrificed during that dedication. So, of course, much less, but still in place there. And so they're going to do all these things. The divisions of the priests that we've talked about are going to be reinstituted once again. So they have their responsibilities and their shifts of when they're supposed to do it. And so the new temple is dedicated, and they're going to observe the Passover in the first month on the 14th day when they're supposed to be. They're ceremonially clean. They're going to kill the Passover lamb. The priests are going to do it. Sometimes it was the priest. Sometimes it was the head of the house would kill the Passover lamb. Kind of varies sometimes. And they're going to begin to observe. They're going to observe the festival of unleavened bread, the festival there of the Passover, and there's this great joy because the king there was favorable to them, and they had completed the building of the temple. It took them a while to do it, but they finally have the building of the temple completed. They've got homes and other things are built there too. The walls are still down. Jerusalem's still in a bad shape, but the temple is now completed. Now we jump to chapter 7. And we're going to do a little time jump here. So from the end of chapter 6 to chapter 7 is about 60 years of time. Okay. So Zerubbabel, all that they will have, I think, will have passed off the scene at this point. We've got a time jump. Also, so you understand as well, we're going to go from Darius, and then Darius eventually is succeeded by a guy by the name of Xerxes. If you know anything about the Greek and the Persian War, Xerxes. Okay, that's the same Xerxes there. It's also the same Xerxes or the same king that we see in the book of Esther that ends up marrying Esther. And so the book of Esther takes place at some point during that 60 years between chapter 6 of Ezra and chapter 7. Okay, so that story's happened there, and we will read that eventually as well. But Xerxes is going to pass off the scene, and his son Artaxerxes will succeed him. And so we're going to pick and so now this becomes Ezra's story, his firsthand account. Okay. So in chapter 7, we start off with, it talks about Artaxerxes during his reign. There was Ezra, who was the son of, and he traces his entire lineage all the way back to Aaron. Okay. I'm not going to name all those names. I already did it once today, but it lists that his lineage goes all the way back to Aaron. So in other words, he was a high priest, or he was in the high priestly line. So he could be a priest. And of course, we say he's a scribe. Of course, the scribes are going to become more and more respected and well known. And of course, we know in the time of Jesus, how many the scribes didn't necessarily always, get along with Jesus. Jesus would say, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees," because they would strain at little things of the law and try to trap him and such. So, but in this case, we've got a good scribe. We've got Ezra. And so Ezra, it says, he was a scribe skilled in the law of Moses, which the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. And the king, meaning Artaxerxes, is going to give. So obviously, Ezra was known to Artaxerxes. And he gives basically a charter to Ezra to lead another group back from captivity into the land, to settle the land again. Again, from the time of Zerubbabel, there was a large number that went, but not nearly all. And probably there were small groups that trickled in and back and forth, probably had some going back and forth between them. But we're going to see that he's going to lead a group out there of Israelites and priests and such. And so we see in the 7th year of Artaxerxes, this begins. And just so you understand too, chapter 7 and chapter 8 chapter 7 is kind of the really basic story of him coming back into the land. Chapter 8 goes into more details, but he's carrying a letter. It takes him about 4 months to get from Babylon to Jerusalem, which is actually fairly quick. Imagine today, we complain about a 4-hour drive somewhere, much less taking 4 months to get somewhere. It would take probably an hour or two in a plane to get to the same area today. But he's going to, and said Ezra had determined in his heart to study the law of the Lord, obey and teach its statutes and ordinances in Israel. In other words, he's going to study it. He's going to obey it, because it doesn't do any good to know it and to teach it if you're not doing it yourself. He's going to obey it, and he's going to teach it. And then we see here, there's a letter. It's listed in here. I'm not going to read all of it, but basically he's carrying this letter from Artaxerxes. It's given him the authority to go there. Artaxerxes is going to send him with He says, any of the people that you want to take with you, they're free to go with you. I'm going to send gold and silver and such of the free will offerings that have been collected in Babylon from your own people, from the priests and such, to take to Jerusalem. And I'm going to send with you, send this money with you. And then when you get in the land, make sure you buy the rams and the bulls and the lambs and all the things that you need to offer the offerings that you may, and you may use the royal treasury to pay for anything else needed for the house of your God or for the temple. And he says, I, King Artaxerxes, issued this decree to all the treasurers in the region. So gives him the authority. And then there's this addendum for the treasurers to read, like, I'm giving Ezra this authority. He's an expert in the law of the God of heavens. And if he asks of you, you must provide in full. Now, he does give a little limit there. He's going to say however much silver, how much this, how much that. He can have as much salt as he would like. But some of the other things, he does put a little bit of a financial limit on it. But whatever is commanded by the God of heavens must be done diligently for the house of the God of heavens, so that wrath will not fall on the realm of the king and his sons. And he says, be advised that you do not have authority to impose tribute, duty, and land tax on any of the priests. In other words, the priests and such are not to pay any taxes and such. They're to be supported by the taxes and by the financial support there in the area. So Artaxerxes, very much like Darius, is like, do all of this so that their God won't get angry with us and punish us as he punished them. And again, he's going to give Ezra authority to set up magistrates or judges to basically judge in matters there to the land there. And whatever you determine by your law, you can do it. So whatever the appropriate judgment for any violation of your law, whether it's death or imprisonment or banishment, whatever. And then he ends it with this: blessed be the Lord, the God of our ancestors, who has this is Ezra, blessed be the Lord who has put it into the king's mind to glorify the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, and has shown favor to me, his counselors, and all his powerful officials. He's shown favor to me through his king and all of this. So I took courage because I was strengthened by the hand of the Lord my God, and I gathered Israelite leaders to return with me. It reminds me of Proverbs 21:1, right? The king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. And like rivers and waters, he turns it whichever way he wants to. God is always in control. We look around and we think, man, just everything's out of whack and everything's out of control. God is still working, and he can. We just have to call upon him and pray and ask for not only our leaders, maybe that boss that's driving you crazy, maybe that family member that is against you, whatever it might be. Pray to God. And he may change his heart and change him into a different direction. He may not. It may not be the will of God to do that, but he has the authority to do that. And so we're going to see. And so he's given Ezra the ability to recruit whatever people he wants to. In chapter 8, we kind of have a little bit of a retelling of this, where he's going to lay out the different people groups that are going to go with him, the numbers of people that are going with him. And again, it's about much less than the first go around. There'll be somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 to 6,000 people are going to go with him when you count the male heads and estimate for women and children. Somewhere in that nature are going to go with him. We have all the descendants. It breaks all of that down. They're going to gather at the river together. They're going to camp there for a couple of days, kind of consolidate, make sure everybody's here that's going with them, and before they depart. But he notices when he's looking around, all these descendants, all these people have come in, but I'm not seeing any priests or Levites, and I'm the only Levite I see here myself. And so he's going to summon the leaders there in Babylon and say, we need priests. We need Levites to go with us and to fulfill things. And so they didn't willingly want to go, but eventually they're going to send them. They're going to send some of the temple and priestly servants and workers. There's about 220 temple servants plus some other various priests and Levites and such are going to go, and they're identified by name, which was important. They had to be identified genealogically so they could make sure they were in the line of Levi and that they were fulfilling their responsibility based on what family group they came from. And so finally, he takes a few hundred of these Levites with him, but initially they didn't want to go. And we see that the Levites and the priests tend to be the ones that want to stay in Babylon, not come to Jerusalem, sadly. And so we're going to see they're going to enter. They're going to stick close to the river. They're going to travel that way because they had told the king they didn't need any. They were going to trust God to get them there. And so they're going to pray to God, protect us. Don't let anything happen to us on the road, because we told the king we didn't need any military support or cavalry to come and protect us. And so they're going to get there. They're going to fast. They're going to plead with God. And he was receptive. He protects them on their way in. They're going to bring all these articles of gold and such into the temple there. And these are part of the free will offering that had come from Babylon. And there's an accounting of that. They're going to take charge of this. All of these items, they're going to bring it into God's house. And then we see here at the end of chapter 8, they arrive in Jerusalem. it's like, as I said, it took them a few days. And then once they get into Jerusalem, they're going to rest for a few days. And that's when they bring all of the gold and such. They're going to turn it over to the priests, those that are there. They're going to verify that the amount that they started with has showed up there. And then there's going to be the exiles who had returned from the captivity, offered burnt offerings to the God of Israel. They're going to sacrifice. They're going to purchase. Once they're there, they're going to purchase, as Artaxerxes had given them authority to do. They're going to purchase the things they need to offer sacrifice of thanksgiving and sin offering and such. And so when we end chapter 8, Ezra is in the land. His group, his several thousand group of exiles that have come with him, are in the land. The temple is built, has been established for 60 plus years. It's going on. When you keep in mind, Ezra himself was, we don't know his age, but probably maybe early 30s, 40s, maybe whatever it might have been. He had grown up in captivity, and he had only known captivity. He had never known the temple. And so now he's coming in and seeing this. It had to be something for him to be there. And so all of this is done. And at the end of chapter 8, we're going to find that they're in the land, temple's built, and now Ezra is going to do some of the work that he needs to do for the reformation of the people there, because he's going to see some things are starting to not be as they should. And he's going to, in chapters 9, chapter 10, going to do some pretty unique things to, again, consecrate the people there of Judah toward God, because they, in that 60-year time of coming in, that first growth, they've already started to drift. They've already started to make some poor decisions. Not only just the regular people, but even the priests and the Levites themselves are going to make some poor decisions, some intermarrying that's going on, that they're like, this is what got us in trouble the first go around. Let's not make the same mistake again. So hopefully that gives you a little better understanding of how things kind of work together with this. Sometimes we read these books and we think these people are but we have Ezra and Haggai and Zechariah, all, these prophets and such that we've read about, and priests. We read about them here working together in this situation. We know about Isaiah and his prophecies about Cyrus. It's just amazing how it all works together like a beautiful tapestry of God's word. So they're in the land. The temple's good. The next step will be some reforming and cleansing of the people. And then we get into the book of Nehemiah, and that's when the actual city of Jerusalem will be rebuilt in the walls, and that process through the man Nehemiah. So God bless you. I hope that was helpful for you, and continue to dig into God's word every day, and we can glean and learn from it. And may God bless you. And we'll see you back here tomorrow for Ezra chapter 9. See you then.